If you listen real closely, drowning out the passerbyers, the cars, and the melody of the ocean, you may just find yourself enticed back into the past with the ladies who are more than willing to seduce you into their houses of pure opulence and bliss, bringing you as deep into the fantasy as you want, as long as your pockets run just as deep. Don't worry, the queens of the night will treat you well, and no one will be the wiser to your visit to the queens on the line.
I got something between my legs that'll make a dead man come. Oh, that. I got something between my legs that'll make a dead man come. Oh, that. I'm gonna turn back my mattress and let you all my springs. I want you to find me, daddy, till the bell do ring. Oh, that. Want you to shade and dry.
Hello, my name is Summer, and this is Paying for It. Thank you for being here for episode 15. Last week, I somehow got my episode numbers switched up. And so, yeah, we are actually in episode 15 today, and that's super exciting. Today, we are diving into part 2 of exploring the line, the red light district of Galveston. Last week, we discussed the backstory of the line, the political part of the line. So I highly suggest, if you didn't watch that, to start there. Come back to me after you've watched that to dive into part 2. Today, though, we will be going into the main houses and players of the district, the queens that ran it. Before getting into that, though, let's go over some channel changes. I know I'm constantly changing over here on Paying for It, but listen, I'm brand new to this and we're figuring it out together. So I'm adjusting my release schedule for y'all. So I liked putting my episodes out on a late night Friday because I'm talking about Vice, but I will be honest with myself. That's a silly schedule to put something out, because everyone's going out partying on a Friday night. They're not listening to podcasts, and I will be real with myself. That makes sense. Instead of releasing the episodes on Friday, we are going to make a few adjustments, and I'm pretty happy with them. So this is how it's going to go from here on out on Paying for It, unless I change my mind. No, I'm just kidding. Sundays will be early video release. So if you're subscribed to my channel for videos, you will get access to them on Sunday mornings early. That way you can enjoy the episode before anyone else. And then, so if you haven't already, I highly suggest you subscribe to get access to video versions a little bit early. Then on top of that, the audio episodes will be going out on Thursday. On most streaming platforms, plus now on YouTube, because I've been working really hard on getting all the backlog up onto YouTube, because originally I was not going to put it on YouTube, but I also learned that's a dumb idea because YouTube is like one of the number one search engines. So I definitely need to be on YouTube. If you prefer to listen on YouTube, the audio versions will now be available there as well. But that is the update. So this episode, the video version is going to be put out on Sunday, and the audio will be on Thursdays. So make sure, if you haven't already, to like, follow, leave a review. It helps out a lot. And if you aren't, go over to YouTube, subscribe to me. It would, just help me out a lot here on Paying for It. All right. And that is all I wanted to cover with that today. So just video versions Sunday mornings, audio episodes Thursday. And yeah. All right, you know what time it is. With that being said, grab yourself a cocktail, a mocktail, a coffee, whatever you fancy. Today, it is, well, I'm recording this today on 420, so if you're, a smoker, happy 420. If you're not, just ignore that. Anyways, today is also a National Cold Brew Day, and as a Dutch Bros lover myself, they had a little bit of a fun cold brew that I had to go get. So this morning I went and got me a little Dutch Bros chocolate cookie crunch, or no, just chocolate crunch, but it's basically cookies. And yeah, I used to love a cold brew. And then I stopped drinking them, so I usually don't go for cold brews anymore. But, on National Cold Brew Day, you gotta try it. So that's what I've got today. Whatever you have, I hope you are enjoying it. Cheers, 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 and let's get into it, shall we? A district doesn't run for over 70 years without there being some main players in the game. The line has a story to tell, and the ladies from the past are here to tell it. Walking down Post Office Street, even as most of the houses today have been demolished, you can still feel the history that has seeped into the streets. The houses that still stand scream out to you to tell you their secrets. They are all but begging for someone to listen. It is safe to say that Post Office Street had its fair share of rendezvousing. And Galveston may try and convince you that Post Office Street has washed away the sins of its past. However, it's really not that simple, is it? No matter how much they scrub, clean, and rebuild, the ghost of its past is waiting there, always ready to reach out and tempt you. And if you listen real closely, drowning out the passerbyers, the cars, and the melody of the ocean, you may just find yourself enticed back into the past with the ladies who are more than willing to seduce you with their stories. But only if you have the asking price. Lucky for us, I just so happen to have the right price. So we are in for a real treat tonight. Welcome to the line. First stop, Angeline Dickinson's House Unknown. Angeline Dickinson is known as the Babe of the Alamo. That's because at 15 months old, she and her mother were the only whites to survive the battle at the Alamo. For those who aren't sure what it was, here is a very condensed version. On February 23rd, 1836, was the start of a 13-day siege of the Alamo Mission here in San Antonio, Texas. When troops under the command of Mexico's President George Antonio de Santa Anna took back the Alamo Mission, killing pretty much anyone and everyone in their way, which turned out to be a very pivotal event in the Texas Revolution, drawing to an end on March 6th, 1836. Angeline Dickinson and her mother Susanna were two of the few who survived. The story goes that Santa Anna wanted to adopt Angeline, promising Susanna that he would shower her with the best Mexico had to offer. Susanna refused this offer, and so luckily for her, Santa Anna released them both, but he used them as a messenger for Sam Hunt, who was the army general at the time, basically sending these two, well, the mom, because what's the 15-month-year-old daughter going to say? But he sent the mother to Sam Hunt telling them, you might as well give up because we've did this here in San Antonio. They don't give up. Spoiler alert. Angeline, at the age of 17, with the support and encouragements from her mother, goes on to marry John Maynard Griffin, a farmer from Montgomery County. She and Griffin are together for about 6 years, and they have 3 kids together. However, at the age of 23, she starts to feel pretty suffocated by her husband, his control over her, and his feelings about her dancing and drinking. Because one night she goes out dancing and drinking with him, she's having a good time, she's probably getting the attention of a lot of men, and when they get outside of this dance hall club, whatever it was called back then, her husband lectures her and kind of braids into her, telling her all the dangers that will happen if you drink and dance and you'll be a loose woman, so he doesn't like it. So he basically tells her, no more of that. We aren't having that. And on top of all of that, she wasn't really a fan of the farm life. And so it's no surprise they go on to get a divorce. She leaves 2 of her children with her mother, and the other one goes off to live with his uncle. So I don't know why the father's nah. But he was nah, we aren't doing that. So, yeah. Off Angeline went, though, drifting to New Orleans, where she is introduced to the life of a working woman, okay? So it starts spreading that the Babe of the Alamo is a loose woman, and she's very promiscuous out in New Orleans, okay? And you know what? Good for you, girl. Do your thing. It's in New Orleans she learns that she learns about the trade. But it's when she moves to Galveston that she makes it her career. Most of Angeline's story is a mystery to history. However, we do know that at some point in her life, she finds herself in Galveston as the first well-known madam of the town, one of the queens who had moved in during the Civil War era as everyone else was rushing out. She had a way about her, and that had those who knew her thinking of her very affectionately. They all kind of adored her. So when she died unexpectedly at the age of 34, it had the town of Galveston quite shocked. The Flake's Daily Bulletin read that she died in 1869 of a uterine hemorrhage, which I'm not really sure what that is, but it sounds not great. Its article read, "We don't know how it happened, nor is it necessary to know, but the Babe of the Alamo embraced the life of a concierge and so died last night. Her pilgrimage is done. Let us erect over her grave the words of the recently departed sister, thou God knowest." And that really shows us the time we're talking about, because what does that even say? Now on to the Cora Morris house. Unknown. If you remember from part 1, she was the one who graciously hosted the group of church women who wanted to attempt to pray over her and, wanted her to repent. That was until one of the church girlers' husband walked in as if it was his own home. Cora was a Tennessee beauty, known to be a petite woman with perky boobs. She served with Terry, Texas Rangers, where she was able to make quite a name for herself with the ranking members of the Confederacy, and I'm sure a decent penny. So when the war ended, it is no surprise that Cora was able to move to Galveston and open an opulence house on her own, where she takes her side hustle and turns it into a full-blown business, baby. Cora Morris's sensual ability to invite you in and make you feel at home made it no surprise that her house became the favorite of all the affluent gentlemen. You would find yourself walking into her parlor house and relaxing into the company of a so sorry, my cats I got a kitten, okay? He going a little crazy. You would find yourself walking into her parlor house and relaxing into the company of a beauty like Helen, all while Cora tempted and teased you with all the good time that was to be had, as long as your pockets were deep enough. See, Cora may have been a gracious host, but she was also an intelligent businesswoman, and she had a keen sense when it came to selling love by the hour. Within a few months of being in Galveston, Cora learns about the most notable social events of the year. The Artillery Ball is hosted by the Armory, a secluded private club event that was only for the highest of class. An event that still goes on even today. In fact, in February, they held their 176th annual ball. Whether by sheer luck or a little business calculation, Cora's house, wherever that house was, I tried like hell to figure it out, just so happened to be right next to where the Armory held the ball, or where the Armory hosted the major events. Cora sees it as a lovely business opportunity, and she sure capitalizes on it. The night of the ball, she goes on to host an open house, meaning no cover charge for the evening. So while everyone is dancing and having a ball, one by one, the prestigious, finely clad men would duck off scurrying to Cora's house for a quick pick-me-up and be back before anyone ever noticed they were even gone. Scandal. She was beautiful and smart, but what had her house becoming number one on the line for her time was her ability to be so damn compassionate to the men who came in feeling the weight of the world on their shoulders, to the women who fainted finding their husbands within her house, but most importantly, she was kind to the woman who worked and lived on the red light district. On August 27th, 1900, Galveston was hit by a devastating hurricane. Now, all hurricanes can be disastrous and devastating, but back in the 1900s, they were really unequipped unequipped nor prepared. Hello, my Travis. My little demon Travis came up to say hello. He's mad because he loves this chair, so he's like, you're in my spot. But yes, back in the 1900s, they were really unequipped nor prepared for this hurricane. It is still today considered the deadliest national disaster in U.S. history. So when this category 4 hurricane raged down on the very unexpecting islanders, it left Galveston as a whole very broken. Cora's house was one of the few to survive this hurricane. So in the aftermath of the hurricane and flood that followed for days, Cora opened her house up to women in need who were ill or injured, making sure she did what she could to help those women in her community, while most didn't give a fuck about them. Once Cora learned that one of the girls she employed had passed unexpectedly, she organized a funeral for her. That was the type of kind-hearted and caring woman she was, mailing out funeral notices to all the women on the line, making sure to tell them to wear black and not to show up under the influence of liquor. Well, no one refused an invite from Miss Cora Morris, so the entire Galveston prostitute population was in attendance. What a way to send someone off, really. community is beautiful. Though most of the rest of the details of her life are, a mystery to history, what we do know of her really solidifies the fact that Miss Cora Morris was the queen of the line back in the Civil War era. Come along, let's walk into the late 19th century and early 20th century, where we'll go down to meet our first madam of this era. Abby Allen was a madam that played the game a little bit differently, definitely allowing for some big rumors to spread about her business and business practices. Abby was a blonde bombshell from California who ends up marrying rich and establishing herself in high society. She was a woman who definitely kept her work life separate from her private life. She preferred to go home to her separate house at the end of the night, her husband and everything, who had nothing to do with her business. She would recruit hot, beautiful women and sell them to other madams for $25 a piece. It makes sense that her practices had people accusing her of slave trading in the sex industry. There were big rumors that were spread about her and people who did this job like her. But a lot of these rumors were, of course, exaggerated in the newspaper to make it worse than what it actually was, because it sounds bad, right? You're selling someone for $25, but all the ladies that got into business with Abby Allen knew what was up and made money wherever they ended up. At least that's what we hope. Anyways, on to Queen Laura, who was sent to Galveston from New Orleans at the direction of a New Orleans madam named Spanish Angus, who just so happened to be a business associate of Abby Allen. Queen Laura goes on to become a majestic part of the early district. She was known to frequent the racetracks at the beach and the lewd burlesque shows that were put on in town. This is like the late 1800s, okay? We have to remember that everyone was way more uptight and judgy, and going out of the social norms still very much outcasted you, even if you were living in the playground of the South. Also, being a woman in the time that didn't need no man for real, well, it also put you way in the outcast role. So for her to show up proud and loud in these higher class racetrack moments, it was the talk of the town. Whether good or bad, she didn't give a fuck. Queen Laura was a beauty, but she was known for her floor-length raven black hair that she kept up in a bun at the top of her head. Men would pay crazy amounts of money to her just to be able to watch her unfold it from the top of her head and let it cascade down her body. She was good at seducing men to fall in love with her and the women she employed. In fact, she had one regular who loved her in her house of pleasure so much that he would often arrive unannounced, kicking out all the rest of her Patreons, close the house, where they would go on to throw a huge extravagant house party for the ladies to enjoy. After Queen Laura made her fortune in Galveston, was ready to retire into the sunset, she was off back to New Orleans, her home, where she presumably lived out the rest of her life, rich and peaceful. All right, now we're off to 2528 Post Office Street, Bordello, where we're going to be greeted by Hazel Harvey, the mother of the era. She was in fact the most motherly, and that's probably why she garnered the nickname as Mother Harvey. She was known to teach the young boys in town how to dance, and they fell in love with her. One of those young boys was Herbert Cartwright, who would later go on to be mayor. He had a thing for older women with their big old bosoms, and he was especially fond of Mother Harvey. They had a close relationship throughout his young adult life. She had purchased 2528 Post Office Parlor House off of Molly Walters, a madam from the past who had retired. The bordello is still standing today, now owned as a private residence, but it is hard not to feel the seduction of that house as you pass by it. Mother Harvey would go on to make a big name for herself within the district. Her house became a very popular parlor house at the time. She makes her fortune within the industry and then goes on to retire from the game, purchasing and running a very successful hotel within Galveston. Let's keep going. It's time we step into a new era. So welcome to the 1920s and the 1930s, the era that saw bootlegging, gambling, and a lot of vice dolls. The first madam's house we will be stopping by is Madam Janet's. A lot of madams tell us that most chose to work in a different location than the one they chose to build a house in or their business in. For Janet, though, it was different. She had been a long-time girl of the line and was known for her ability to cater to a specific kind of clientele. As she grew in popularity, she was able to get enough funds to buy her own house in 1927. She marketed her house, letting it be known that she planned to cater to the pervert crowd. So basically, her girls were willing to get a little kinky with the men who came through. And of course, her house was an instant success. Once Madam Janet got her own house and promoted herself to Madam, she never turned another trick. But she was a very popular house for the fact that she was willing to cater to the perverts. Once she promoted herself to Madam, Janet never took another client. Perks of being the boss, I suppose. She, however, used her fortune to spoil herself. She traveled the country, loved to attend the World Series of Baseball yearly, and buy the finest whiskey she could get her hands on. Even as she was older, she was known to have an energy for life, dancing with customers during business hours, and also flirtatiously tempting you out of your money. Okay, on to Lulu Wilcox's house, the next door neighbor of Mother Harvey's at 2628 Post Office Street. She was a stunning redhead that turned every head in the room when she entered. Her marriage to a more unassuming man may have shocked some, but it was his kind-hearted, almost fatherly approach towards the Wilcoxes' girls and the others on the line, making them family. It was no wonder she fell in love with him. Wilcox's husband's big personality and kindness to the woman earned him the nickname Mayor of the Post Office Street. For Christmas, he would host a dinner party. And invite all of his relatives. He would also include all of the girls in the house in all of the festivities and would not let anyone of his family or anyone disrespect the ladies of the house, which is quite nice. Okay, off to the girl after my own heart, Abyss Smith, who lived more privately across the street from 29th Street, edge of the real world, known as the Brick House. It was a 2-story cozy parlor house that was apart from the main district, just like she liked it. Private. She kept to herself, but was highly intelligent, deeply philosophical, and loved to read. She became almost like a local mythical creature due to her aloofness, not really giving much of herself away when in conversation. When asked, she would only say that she was from Texas and would give no further details about herself. She even had a second landline installed in her room so that all of her personal calls could be directed to her. Although she was a very private person, she never hesitated to defend herself and her profession. So she may have been quiet, but she was feisty as hell. And we know that because in an interview, she goes on to defend her career by stating, "I have something men want and are willing to pay for it. It's my property. So why shouldn't I sell it? You goody wives that try to drive us out make me tired. Why can't they see that Galveston is better off with us?" And oh boy, does she seem like she was a woman well ahead of her time. So you know, what a fucking queen. Okay, come back with me to Mother Harvey's house. You know, the one that's still standing at 2528 Post Office. In 1930, Mother Harvey retires from the game. She sells her establishment to Mary Grouchy Russell, who, if you remember from the first episode, was backed by a very highly influential crime family of the time, Marcello brothers. Mary Grouchy had an eye for the sex business and a talent for recruiting young, beautiful women, specifically college women, who aligned themselves with what Mary offered to them, which was a certain type of freedom and independence that they could get no other way. Mary was also keen on being able to recruit beautiful, smart women, but women that she knew would be able to succeed in the business, women that she could see would fit this lifestyle. Mary was able to prove it to these women by showing them all of her success stories of the past of women who used to work with her or still worked with her. It wasn't long before Mary Grouchy Russell became the top queen of the district, running a very, very successful business that allowed these young, classy women to work for tuition, adventure, and fun instead of survival. Since Mary and her Sunshine Sallies, the nickname of her Vice dolls, were aligned with Mayor Cartwright, it was often that they would team up together using the power of the pussy to influence powerful companies and people, seducing them to move their money to Galveston. It was something that worked quite often. Mary and Cartwright's most successful triumph story involves Eric Feasy, the Lipton Tea executive and vice president of properties. He was described as a self-righteous, proper Englishman who at first was very standoffish about moving the headquarters to Galveston and just in general standoffish about Galveston in general. That was all going to change though, because Cartwright started to befriend the man, showing him all the fun that was to be had in Galveston for a man like him. On the weekend before the contract was signed, he was insistent that they celebrate. So Cartwright called Mary up and they came up with the perfect girl and plan for this occasion. A young 19-year-old from Dallas who came from old money and was well-spoken with flawless manners. They decided that this 19-year-old would play the part of a Sunday school teacher. So they took her down to the nicest department store and spent $2,000 on getting her into that part. That night at dinner, she didn't wait a minute to start seducing him with her sweet but semi-naughty school teacher vibe. Before the bill was even paid for, Eric was whisking her off to Hotel Galvez, where they spent the remaining weekends, and by the end of it, he was officially under her spell. Cartwright stated she must have really put it to him. Because when Cartwright picked him up on Sunday mornings, the Lipton Tea vice president was in love and stated that she had gone to teach Sunday school and she would be back shortly, so they better get their business taken care of because he didn't want to miss when she came back. With all of this, Mary was able to make a fortune, making her one of the most successful madams of the district of all time. She lived a high life and was able to expand her business with at least 3 houses. On top of that, she was able to spoil herself and those she loved. She went on to buy her husband a $40,000 yacht. She was so successful and reigned as the queen of the line. Her empire lasted for over a quarter of a century. She was the queen for a very long time. Come along now. It's off to the 1940s and the 50s, the last hurrah of the wide open city of Galveston and its accepted red light district. We are off to meet Jessie Dirty Neck Elliott. Now, I'm not sure how a woman got such a nickname, but damn do I wish I knew, because what? Anyways, Jessie, well, like most before her, was ahead of their time, and she had a knack for the business. If anyone should take the reigning queen grouch-eyed out of the game, it should be someone worthy, and that was Dirty Neck. Jessie moved to Galveston after being banished from Corpus Christi after World War II, which again, it's like, what the fuck did she do? I wish I knew. Like, a lot of the times when doing my stories, I feel these moments where I'm like, damn, this was such a different time. Even though the more I learn about people in history, it's like, we actually haven't changed that much. But at the same time, I'm like, after World War II, we were still banishing people? Could you imagine what 2023 would look like if we were still just banishing people from the city? Like, you don't get to be here anymore. You've got to go. Like, it's so silly to me. What a different time, to be honest. Anywho, sometime after World War II, Jessie is banished from Corpus Christi, which is another Texas beach town, and she moves to Galveston. At first, she's like, fuck going back into the sex trade, so she opens a nightclub on 61st Street, which at the time was just slightly out of the city limits. The street in the 1930s was a street known to be full of good times, gambling halls, liquor establishments, aka bars, and places to dance. This was the place just on the outskirts of town where you wanted to be on a Friday night. The most famous gambling joint on the street was owned by the Marcio brothers, called the Hollywood Dinner Club. Jessie, though, she didn't want to be like every other club on the strip. No, she wanted to stand out because she was creative. So she added nude dancing to her club, which, I mean, come on, Galveston's first unofficial strip club. Love that for them. However, this was on the outside of the city limits, so it was often prone to raids from the Texas Rangers, just all out, always getting like picked on from the Texas Rangers. Jessie eventually is like, I am over this constantly having to be worried about raids and being worried about the cops just busting in here while I'm just trying to do business. I'm tired of violating the law. I'm going to run me a whorehouse, saying to her business partner who loaned her the money to do just that. Jessie buys her first commercial property on 37th Street and Harbor. Well, Dirty Neck, within a few months of operating her whorehouse, bankrupts Grouch Eye, and she starts to build a true empire. She goes on to buy 7 more locations, 3 on Post Office Street, 2 of her houses houses on the line were connected by a runway. See, she too had aligned herself with Cartwright, and when he would conduct raids or be in on the loop of raids going to happen, because, he was the mayor, he, of course, would give her the heads up. She then would go have her girls dip through the runway to the other establishment in the tunnel, just like our New Orleans queen Norma Wallace. With the help of a cop, she would get her girls to safety. It was only a matter of time before Jessie was not only taking over the market and becoming the wealthiest madam ever. And let's be real here. We already know the women in Galveston were wealthy. They drove the entire economy. Jessie, though, wasn't just a wealthy madam. No, see, Jessie realized money talked. So with her money and her aggressive expansion, she became very powerful and a prominent figure within the city and the city's politics. Kind of interesting to think about how prostitution in the most major cities was always considered a necessary evil, something that was always going to be. But as soon as we come into this era where women within the space realize the potential of their power and how much that weighed on the world, it was quickly ripped from them, especially the women who had power and were using it to their advantage. All right. With that, let's move on to the last stop of the night. She may not have been a lady of the night, but she was an ally and woman enough to know that she just got lucky in her birth. The honorary mention, follow me, because we are off to Ruth Levi Kemper's place. Ruth knew she was privileged enough to be able to get an education in history. She goes on to marry into the most privileged and powerful family of Galveston, the Kempers. Her father-in-law was the one who put the commission government into place, and she was the one who was going to take it down because she realized, like in the last episode, we were talking about how much Commissioner Johnson was shady AF, and she realized that ain't right. So she knew, I'm about to take this all by storm, and that is what she did. See, Ruth Kemper saw the issue with the commissioner form of government. So right around the time that Commissioner Johnson was making his fortune on coercion, she was forming her all-out war on said commission. With a smart woman behind the movement, change happened. Though that would have been enough to mark her in history, she wasn't ready to stop. She went on to run for a position on the new council in 1961. Ruth was not only able to win the voters of unions, school administrators, and employees of houses of worship, but she also had a deep camaraderie and love for the ladies on the line. She would go on to hold a public meeting with a big-time madam of the era named Big Tip Marie, which most of Big Tip Marie's story is, a mystery to history. But this meeting went very well, and Ruth Levi Kemper states, as far as I'm concerned, but for the grace of God, I would be in your house. And I believe that people in your profession have a place and have always had a place in our civilization. And I'll do everything in the world I can to protect you. But I want you to know that I intend to have an honest police department. I prefer to live and let live, but if you find that you have to pay off the police, I want to be told about it. Her acceptance and understanding of the sex profession and those who worked within it really garnered a support from a huge part of the society that up until this point had been used as a pawn in the political game, but never actually listened to. So it makes sense that the red light district contributed more to her campaign than any other campaign prior. Ruth would go on to be the first woman elected to the Galveston city government. We love that for her. We love a badass queen. Ruth may have never been in the district, but she was a queen in her own right. Understood and accepted a community that had been used and abused, not by the men who came through their doors, but instead by the government and city and the police, who should have been the ones to protect them, to keep them safe. Ruth understood that, and she wanted to see change and clean, uncorrupt police force to keep the ladies on the line safe, but just in general, have a clean and uncorrupt police force. Which, too bad that didn't technically happen. And though she did her best to support the women on the line, to keep it going for them, and to keep a clean police force, the outside power that would be seeing the writing on the wall when it came to women becoming educated, learning the power of the pussy, and learning how to work it. And I believe that may have scared said powers. But who am I to say anything? Anyways, that concludes the tour of the line. Who in our walk down the line seduced you? Which madam and house would have ended your Friday night? Would it have been the babe of the Alamo when the world was new and wild? Maybe Cora Morris and her kind nature called to you? Possibly Mother Harvey and her motherly ways? For me, I know I would have been drawn in by the mystery of Abyss Smith to, talk to her about books and stuff. I would love to know who you find yourself seduced by. So definitely let me know. And yeah, with that, that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed part 2 of History of the Line and the queens that ran it. Just a reminder that audio episodes will be on Thursdays now, and if you're feeling my spicy takes and want to see my spicy history come to life, I highly encourage you to subscribe to get access to the video versions early on Sunday mornings. Yes, with that, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening and week. Join me next time when we dive into part 3, the final part of our series on the line, and what everyday life looked like for our Galveston Vice dolls. Until then, though, check out my TikTok, Twitter. They'll link down below. And, well, that's all I have. Goodbye.